Just which end to hold.
Okay. You're pretty good at that? You ever get it wrong?
No. I get the
Okay.
swinging part wrong, but not the which end to hold part.
Yeah, Cordy's been pretty quiet. I think he probably has missed one.
What? I thought we were going to review the new drivers from 1999, so I'm a little bit thrown off. I haven't looked into it since then, so you'll have to excuse my lack of knowledge today.
I brought one.
Oh, you didn't mail that to me?
Not yet. I got to put a shaft on it probably, unless you can do that.
Okay. Yeah, send it over, please.
So here's what we're looking at. We got a gears picture. This is John Rahm at Impact. The yellow vector here, this arrow, is the path. The pink one is the face. What kind of shot do you think he hits?
It's not a grounder.
No, it's not a grounder. He's fixing to hit a nice little push draw out there, Matt. Here's the contact on the face, and he hits up on it 4 degrees or so, depending on the shot. Then you've got another factor that goes into this, and that's the shaft itself. So when he's hitting this shot, the shaft is actually bending, even though you might not think of it this way. My finger's where the T's at. As he's about to hit this, the shaft's actually bending toward the target. And in his case, it's bending 36 millimeters. Now, that might be because this isn't his club. I don't really know. But it's also bending in another direction, which is downward. So as hard as it is for me to flex this shaft, club head is actually moving down. Shaft bends that way when you hit too. So you got tons of variables in what's actually happening when they do it. And this is not one that we're going to talk about today, is how the shaft bends. But we can isolate just how these club heads move and how this works and come up with a good story about how to help you make a good buying decision. And I promise today what I'm going to talk about, no one else on the internet is talking about, and specifically on this particular slide right here. This is the actual center of gravity. So let's do a quick little start there. Center of gravity is like basically where the sweet spot is. And everybody thinks they grab their driver and the sweet spot is in the middle of the club. These tiny little red dots actually are demonstrating where the center of gravity is of every single 2020 driver in almost every combination I can make it. What do you think of that chart? You see any in the middle there, Cordy?
I see
one pretty close.
very, very few.
You got one that's pretty close. Otherwise, the center of gravity is not in the middle of the club on very many of these. And it's really important to know where they are because that's what helps you pick out a good driver. It's a small part of it, but an important part. So that's what we're going to talk about here.
Why do I care where the center of gravity is on the club?
Good question. Let me see if I have that chart here too. So the center of gravity on the golf club has far more to do with where the ball's going to end up. So taking a look at this slide. Forget about many of the fancy words there. You can see the arrows coming off the club. Whenever you hit a shot just off center, like we can use this picture here, or this one right here would be perfect. Let's do this one in black. So let's say my center of gravity is right in the middle of this club, dictated by this red X. Everything hit on this side is effectively giving you the chance to spin the ball to the left or draw it. Anything on this side of that red X is going to give you the tendency to hit fades and slices. So there's some gearing that kicks in. Now, knowing where the actual center of gravity is really helps you curve the ball a particular way. So the better you are, the more significant it is for you to know this. So as an example, if you fight like hooking too much, so every time you swing, your shots are a little bit like Dustin Johnson this week or the last week in the first match, he would be better off hitting the CG or slightly towards the heel to give him some benefit of not over curving. And that would be a nice way to actually learn how to hit your driver into the fairway, just slightly off-centered hits. That's why it's significant. So basically all these pictures up here, minus the $5 that you owe me, Cordy, is tells that story just in a different method. Then another one that we're going to talk about today is the moment of inertia. And think of that in the most generic way of which clubs are the most forgiving. Caveat to that is that I'm taking out the human element of all of this. So it's basically just a raw measurement of a club head that gives me the center of gravity and the moment of inertia, or how forgiving they are. From there, you almost can't use other variables. So I see a lot of testing that's done with with humans, swinging a club and see what happens. The variables in there that you can't control for are the person, the shaft, and anything that's going on with the golf ball itself. And those play a role in which driver you should play. But if you can isolate those, take those variables out, know exactly what this is meant to do, then that should be the basis for your buying decision. It's hard to do that. And I really wish there's one more test that I could do, which is the ball speed off of mishit shots and centered shots on every one of these drivers, because then I could tell you which one actually goes the farthest, spins the least, and is the most forgiving objectively. What do you think, Cordy? Is that a good crash course?
Makes sense.
Okay, I'm working on that last one too, so that'll be a ton of fun. So let's go through each one of these drivers. First, here's the total graphic. This one is a spicy little chart, if you know what this means. On the x-axis, I have every single driver and how forgiving it is. So you've got your, let me move you guys out of the way here. You got your TS2 Plus, which I'll talk about how that one actually works. So 410 Plus, Maverick Max, TS2, Ping, LST. Those are the most forgiving drivers out of all of them that I've tested. Doesn't mean these aren't forgiving. It just means that these are more. And then you've got your Maverick Sub-Zero as the very lowest. And then all those drivers you talked about in 1999, Cordy, they don't often fit in the chart. They might sit about where my cursor's at. Like, it's terrible. If you have a driver that's more than a couple years old, chances are you've got a potential issue with clubs holding you back. This MOI chart, this is your moment of inertia on the x-axis again, has like a modern driver. Your 410, your Max, your Sim Max D, all of those are really forgiving. They sit on the far right side of the chart. You get into like your SLDR and then go back like 100 years ago to your Callaway S2H2, and you've got a driver that's not forgiving at all. There you go with your SLDR. I really like that driver. If you hit it right where you want to in the middle of the club, that thing was long. It didn't spin very much. That's why people basically had the campaign of Loft Up was created because of that driver. It didn't spin very much regardless of where you hit it on the face. You needed more launch. You still use that thing?
Great. It was good. I had a 12 degree. I had this Tour AD BB6X, which was fantastic. Kind of want to hit this thing.
It will be interesting for you to try, especially after maybe we talk about CG today. But when you mishit that even slightly, it's so low on our MOI chart relative to, say, the 4,500 to 5,000 grams per centimeter squared, which is how that measurement is actually taken. That difference of 1,000 to 2,000 on the chart here is really significant on mishit shots. So you hit that just a little bit on the toe, a little bit on the heel, the ball doesn't go as far, and it is going to be likely to be very crooked. So
be practical with us. So I'm playing, let's say, 10 holes with each club, right? Like a new, my new Ping driver, and then this SLDR. Practically on 10 tee balls, what difference would we see if we're going to look at some kind of average or something?
Yeah, I guess I don't know how I could answer that right now, but I would say that if you mishit these shots by as little as half of an inch, you'd see for you how far you drive it, 10, 15, 20 yards of distance lost, and the height of the shot goes down, the accuracy will be more crooked. That would be a good one for you to test. Play 9 holes with that thing today and track where you hit it on the face, even if you just drew some little dots on it at the end. And I'd like to hear how that would work in the real world. Best I can do is just give you some measurement estimate on that. This is where I think people go wrong, though. They believe the stories of how clubs are improving, which I find very true, by the way. After measuring all of these, I have yet to find a company that isn't improving their driver from 2018 to 19 to 20. They might be subtle. They're not always the 20-yard irrational commercials you might see online or you might see on TV about how much further people are hitting a ball. But they are significantly changing year to year to year. So, for example, if you go from an M6 of last year and then your driver before that was an M1, you've lost. There's a ton of forgiveness that TaylorMade's been able to add to their driver without increasing very much backspin. So the M1 is far inferior to an M6 or even the Sim Max that are available right now. And you can't really know that without trying them, for one, but by measuring these and understanding how exactly CG and MOI work, That's the best story I can give you for that. Now, if you go back to 1999, your Pittsburgh Persimmon driver, this thing, you remember the size, they're really tiny. They're not very heavy. And that is going to be crooked, short, and awful. And some people even come into us. I showed you a picture the other day of golf clubs that come into GOLFTEC, and it's a mess on what people are bringing in. So here's a picture of, let's start with Titleist. I'm going to go through these 2020 drivers and try to go super fast because we have a ton of content on YouTube already about almost every single one of these. So this is like super high level, how you might pick out a driver and what might work for you and what might be better than something else. So I get a ton of questions. I've gotten so many questions. I'm going to guess over 50 since we've started talking about these measurement tools that we use and these dots that I'm placing on the club and the MOI and CG measurements. Those are all from teachers. They're all curious about how are you measuring this? How's this work? So my first disclaimer is that I'm measuring the way that I think is the most correct. And when you see numbers that might be different than what I have, or you have a hypothesis about how this is coming about, know that you can measure these clubs differently, just like most of golf itself can be measured multiple different ways. And I know that hits home to you, Matt. You've got friends who are in the whole golf world measuring people's swings in different ways. The same thing can be done for golf clubs. So
yeah, and as I'm sure you're going to tell us, the measurements mean different things to different levels of person. So just because something tests lower in some certain category could well be better for a 20 handicapper versus a 5.
Totally. And we haven't talked about this at all, but you're nailing the point about how moving around the CG changes the MOI or the forgiveness. So moving these things around doesn't make them, we see lower numbers or higher numbers. It doesn't make them better or worse. This one, though, I do really like. This is your Titleist TS2 driver. So the MOI here of 5216. To give you some perspective, illegal is 6,000. And this on my chart of MOI can at times be the highest one. The highest one I've really tested so far was either the Ping G410 or this Cobra driver, which our friends over at My Golf Spy have deemed the most accurate driver. As tested by humans. So I'm actually doing the same thing with just our MOI measurements, and I'm not at all surprised that that was the most accurate driver because it has the highest MOI. That's probably a better way of doing it, running a test like that, than having a lot of people hit a shot. So this one is extremely forgiving, that 5216, and here's the center of gravity, basically in the middle, a little bit above the center, and possibly ever so slightly in the heel. A cool way to use this to your advantage, though, is that it does have an adjustable weight in there, and that's this part in the back. When you put the heaviest weight in there, the MOI gets really high because whenever you add weight, you're also making a club more forgiving. So I'll keep trying to mention forgiveness basically is synonymous to the MOI piece. When you add some more weight, you make a club more forgiving. If you couple that with making the shaft ever so slightly shorter with this head and that heavy weight, you have like the combo for the straightest driver that's being made right now. So while most people don't think of Titleist as really making a really superb driver, this thing is awesome. And that would be a cool way to go about it. Like if you want to hit a fairway, you just need to do it. I think that's a great place to start. I don't have a slide for this one. This is the TS1. This is their newest driver. So we measured the CG yesterday, or sorry, the MOI yesterday, and it comes out at about 4,800, which is lower than this too, but the head weight is also 10 to 15 grams lighter than the TS2. So what you're getting is a really forgiving driver, not the most forgiving, but a really forgiving driver that's lighter, so you can potentially swing this thing faster and hit it farther. So I haven't done any experimenting myself, just hitting this, but this combo seems pretty good and interesting for someone who might want to hit it farther but still get a forgiving driver. Well, usually there's a little bit of a trade-off on forgiveness and distance. This might be a good combo, and this seems to be the trend. Is the OEMs are making drivers that you can swing faster because the forgiveness is almost maxed out all the way.
It's amazing what happens to your average driving distance though when you don't hit 113 yards in the right trees. Your average,
you got it. Definitely your mean, your median, those go up tremendously, and that's more what I'm interested in. Like if you go and you buy a driver off the rack and you just pick one up and you hit 10 shots with it and you say, well, I really like this one because I hit one really far, you're doing it wrong. That's the wrong way to do it. You really need to have someone who can guide you through this and help you with the sophisticated answer about why your drivers are better and give you some good objective data. The TS3 is really good. The MOI is actually lower than the 1 by a couple hundred grams per centimeter squared. So this one's just good because I think you can move that center of gravity around all over the place. So if you want to, if you're trying to avoid overdrawing, this would be a good place for the center of gravity towards the toe. And if you want to draw it, you can move it more towards the heel. And then that makes the shot that might land right on that red dot right there change the curve by up to 15 to 20 yards, depending on how fast you swing it. So that's like the value in knowing the CG, is knowing where to hit it. We're talking about drivers today, but many of the fairway woods and hybrids have their center of gravity closer to where my cursor is at. And that's when the good players, like what we talked about, I think last week with you, Cordy, hit a shot in the middle of the club and it curves too much. And then they immediately make, man, I just hooked these clubs too much. Or it's me. I do something different with this 3-wood or hybrid. And really, it's just the off-center strike relative to the center of gravity is making the ball curve too much. What do you think? Am I going fast enough, but still hitting most of the points? Questions so far?
Yeah, I think what's interesting is I'm guilty of this, and I think all my friends as well, but I don't know really anybody that's ever moved a weight in the driver. Everyone just sets it and forgets it. Like, I never moved this.
Yeah.
The entire time I had it, when I probably should have played around with it a little bit and tried a few different things, I think. So I think that's an interesting point now, understanding exactly what it's doing and why you might want to do it, especially with the concept of if you're trying to have a stock shot that you hit every time. I think that could really something to experiment with that I don't think many people do.
Yeah, and I think they don't do it because they don't know how or why.
Yeah, or they just crank it to the full setting. They also don't understand the relationship between setting the fade bias or draw bias relative to changing the loft, because changing the loft also messes with your tendency to hit it left or hit it right.
And that's you're really hitting on a point there of these drivers are so adjustable with the sleeves that you can angle the shaft ever so slightly and change the face angle or the loft, adding loft, delofting it, closing the face. All of those are options now. So without the help of someone who actually knows what they're doing, you're kind of guessing, and then you're likely, as Matt, you've told me an analogy of, you're likely to have these be an ornament in your garage without some good help. So honestly, getting fit by someone who understands the center of gravity and how forgiving a driver is, and who's done it before and also understands how to teach people how to play better, that's like your ultimate recipe to spend a little bit of money on the front end to make sure that you don't make a bad investment. This is the one I'm telling Cordy all the time to try. This is your G410 Plus pictured up there. MOI is really high, almost 5,400, with the CG closer to the toe of the club. It's really good. This one is awesome, I think, for almost anybody who walks in just wants a driver that goes straight and far. I like this one a ton. It does spin a little bit more than others, so potentially just lowering your loft a touch would be a good idea with that one. But as I keep going through this, I'm going to go through these things fast and tell you all about these drivers. But the main point I can say is that all of them are really good. There isn't one of these that, for instance, I couldn't just grab, fit myself for the right combination of shaft and grip, and however I wanted to dial in the specs of every OEM and hit it really well. 1999, like Cordy brought up earlier, there was probably one good driver, and it wasn't even very good. But there was only one person making, or one company making a good driver. Nowadays, they're all doing a great job. It's just finding that one that's like tailored for you. So hopefully this info helps here. The one I do actually like, that is a very big sleeper in the whole world, is this one, Mizuno ST200. As absurd as it is, Mizuno has a really nice driver here. And the part that I like about this one the most is that it's actually a very low spin driver. So it has a high MOI, 4,800 on there is what you see. So high MOI generally tends to spin more. This one does not. So this has the potential for you to launch this really high, spin it very low, and be forgiving on mishit shots. Now, this is the non-adjustable one. The adjustable one is one I would tell you not to buy. And not because it's really terrible. It's that unless you really want to change the left and right throw, so if you really do fight a draw, or fight a slice. This is actually really good. So sorry, I need to amend that comment. Don't buy this if you hit the ball very straight and you're just looking for something that'll go long or straight or that variable. This is for the curve. So if I take both of these weights and slide them in the heel into the toe, I've got the club that actually moves the center of gravity along the face the most, up to about 6.5 millimeters. So far I've been able to move that, which doesn't sound like a lot, but that can be an easy 20, 25 yard, maybe even more than that difference in which way the ball will curve. But when you move the weights back, the MOI doesn't get as high as I think it should on some of these other drivers. Plus, you've really just increased the height of the center of gravity, and now you've made a driver that spins a lot. So there's a lot to put into that statement. To simplify this one, if you want to curve it the most, change which way left or right it goes. This is really good for that. But if you're looking for farthest, straightest, and you already hit it far and straight, I wouldn't recommend that one. I'd stick to the one that actually doesn't have much adjustability to it. But it's probably the first year I've seen Mizuno.
We got a question in. We got a question in here, Nick, on MOI. You talked about moving all the weight to the back. Could you, in one of the earlier, when you were talking about one of the drivers, I don't remember. Why does that increase MOI, or can you go into a little more? They're looking for a little more clarity around that.
Sure. So take this picture, for example, if you can see even just a little bit of this. The green center of gravity dot that I drew here is a little further back. The farther back that you make that, the less the club head. MOI and forgiveness is really just the amount of twisting that happens when you hit a shot. The farther back you can slide this weight, the less twisting you get on those off-center hits. If you take like your SLDR driver, which has the center of gravity really close to the face, any mishit shots twist this tremendously when you hit it. So all the manufacturers are trying to move the weight as far back as they can and as low as they can. Like the sim driver is a really good example of that one. And we're going to hit this one next. You can see that almost like the rudder, the inertia generator that they put down here in the bottom, and where they have a weight port right in the back. That's their best attempt at lowering that as far back as they can, down as well. The problem with a lot of these drivers, when they're trying to make them that way, is it's challenging. Like take this Mizuno driver. I might move the weights all the way back, but they're not nearly as low to the ground as the TaylorMade is. So now you've raised the center of gravity, which also makes you spin it more. Again, going super fast, super high level. These are things golfers should know, but you can learn this from your coach and your fitter. It's not something that you can learn just on your own. This is not like a good time for Corey to sit in his armchair expert underneath that lamp and try to guess at what's going to happen. There are too many options. There's too many variables. It's too hard to do this yourself. All these are
I think what this is doing is I think what this is doing is it's helping people understand the questions to ask. You don't need to know the answers. What you do know is that what you do need to know is that these questions are the ones you should be asking.
Awesome point. I would ask my fitter a bunch of different things. One, should I try a shorter length shaft? The worse you are, the more that is the correct option as a whole. Next, do you know where the center of gravity of the driver is? And then if you have adjustable weights like this sim does in this picture I'm showing you, the center of gravity moves across the face. It doesn't end up in the same spot. And quick refresher, that center of gravity is really like the sweet spot. That's where you'd want to hit it to get the straightest ball flight, assuming that you have a swing that is hitting the ball straight, zero face, zero path. Now, the other part could be which one of these is more forgiving. I wouldn't be afraid to ask a fitter 3 or 4 different questions on that, and they should be able to know the answer, or at least give you like I think this one is a little bit more forgiving than this, and then give you some justification for why. Those are just the most basic questions every golf coach should know. It's hard to find that information though, so it isn't easy to ascertain as a student, but hopefully that's what we're getting at here.
It's also difficult if you're dealing with people that just sell into one line. You know, if a fitter is just selling into one kind of club, you're gonna have some tough time.
And we're trying to carry not every manufacturer, because that's impossible too, but we do have 5, 6, 7 OEMs depending on the time of year, and that really encompasses about 95% of the demand that we get. Somebody comes in and ultimately asks for a driver we don't have, but it happens very rarely because we're very cognizant of that. And then we're also very cognizant to make sure that we don't bring in any garbage. There's nothing in here that isn't good. All of these drivers, I've got about 20 of them on this table that you can't see. They're all good. This one has been interesting to me. This is the TaylorMade Sim. And I don't know if I've talked to you guys about this, but I'm puzzled by some of this. Not in a bad way, but I am puzzled by this design. When you look at the club head, you can see my red dots here, and I'm drawing those to scale as best I can. First, you got your forgiveness. MOI of 4493 in the neutral setting. That isn't the highest one. That isn't the highest one at all. But I love this driver for a certain set of people. The center of gravity, those dots, all of them are on the toe side of center. So, Cordy, knowing what you know now, who might this kind of driver be good for? And I think Cordy's lost. Matt, what do you think?
Did I do it convincing? My screen is frozen. I can't answer.
That's what I thought. Yeah.
Was that good?
The toe side dots are going to be for someone who overdraws it.
You got it. So if you stand up on the tee and you are deathly afraid of hooking, and my computer's going too here, Cordy. If you're deathly afraid of hooking, this is like the perfect driver for you. It is going to give you the most gear effect. So any shot that's hit on this side of the club is likely to help you impart some rightward spin on a shot. Like Dustin Johnson, always trying to hit fades, even though he's got the mechanics to hit some nice, high, massive draws. This is a great driver for him. The other part that I find interesting too is the neutral setting is this dot here. This dot is below the center of the face. It's actually the lowest one I've tested so far. So now you've got a spin variable. Anything that I hit above that dot actually has very low spin. So this could be a driver for someone who swings fast and hooks. This is the first one I would try.
So this is like TaylorMade's tour driver then?
Kinda, it's not. This is just their regular sim, but it effectively would be the best driver for tour players. Now, I'm not saying that this doesn't work if you do slice, but setting the driver in the most draw setting almost gets the center of gravity back to the center of the club. And that's really what manufacturers are using to change the curve of the ball. There are definitely more heel center of gravity golf clubs that would help you draw more. But I think this one's good for everybody. I'm just shocked at how low they were able to get the center of gravity and how the CG is toeward. But when you look at the actual design of the driver, there's a lot of mass of the club out here towards the toe, especially on the high toe, relative to some of the other drivers. So that's dragging some of the CG over, would be my best guess there too. So cool driver. I'm just confused at why it's built with the CG all the way towards, well, not all the way, more toeward than some of these other ones. Now here's your Sim Max. This one has a little bit of adjustability to it as well, but not very much. So the big dog, this is their straightest one for sure. The Sim Max center of gravity is right here. I've also drawn the Max D dot on it. That is this one. And you can see how that is slightly more heelward than anything else you've seen. So what they've done in the draw version is not done anything massively by closing the face 5 or 6 degrees. They just moved the center of gravity slightly towards the heel. So now you've got more gear effect, more potential for those draw shots. So
I mean, just looking at these two, Nick, why would I ever choose the Sim? Just like looking at this, not like everything else thrown out the window, but why would I ever choose a Sim when I just want a pretty neutral driver that's forgiving, that I can hit as far as I can? Like what?
Okay. Good question. Here's the dot for the Sim, just the regular Sim Max. Notice how it's ever so slightly towards the toe and slightly higher than the center of the face. Here is the Sim. This is the standard setting on that. It's slightly more towards the toe, but lower on the face. The lower the center of gravity, the less spin you put on the ball. The less spin you put on the ball, there's a chance, depending on who you are, that you hit this much further than the other one.
Got it.
So a centered strike here will spin significantly less. So this ultimately is your driver if you already hit it far. I think this is a good one.
I mean, that's really interesting because I know for a fact, like personally, my strikes are high on the face and more towards the heel, just because I've been trained to hit it there. Like I was told from a young age that that's where the sweet spot on a driver was. So I've always tried to do that. And so my pattern is just kind of there. So it's really interesting to me that, they're changing that. And then what it would take for someone like myself to adjust after all these years of, trying to hit a driver a certain way.
Yeah, on this particular case, so if you took that Sim dot that I'm hovering over here, and you actually struck the shot high and in the heel, just slightly, I know you're not mishitting it much, but a little high heel, you would get more fade bias on this one and a lot lower spin than what you're used to out of your G400. So yeah, that ball would look pretty different. You'd need more loft. You need more loft and have the expectation that you're going to push and maybe push cut more with this driver.
What's kind of the minimum club head speed you recommend for the sim here?
I think this would work for anyone. So while I'm saying less spin, I would just go up in loft. So you can get this up to your 12.5 degrees, no problem. I just like this one for people who have too much. That's like the perfect driver to try. The Sim Max is one of the straightest. It's a really good one if you just want to hit fairway. So it's all this is player dependent too. What are your goals? What are you trying to get out of this? What are you trying to get out of a club fitting? And then your fitter can help you make a good decision there. You're never going to be able to find like the perfect decision. The perfect way to find a driver would be to get fit, hitting every single one of them over the course of days or weeks, and hit multiple shots, like maybe 50 with each driver, have everything tested, hit on gears, have your TrackMan running, know exactly where all those shots went. Then go play probably like 50 rounds of golf with it and see which one went the straightest when he went out to go play. And you see how pretty quickly I'm getting to like a pipe dream? You can't do that.
You're pretty quickly getting to next season when there's a whole bunch more of them out.
This is not practical. What you really want to do is hit 4 or 5 shots with each one. 4 or 5 good shots, not bad, good ones. You're the center of the face. And then from there, you have enough data to help you make a good buying decision. Go out there, play with that thing, and own it. That's how a good club fitting should be.
Plus, a good fitter can watch you hit your driver, the one you already have in your bag, and immediately go to the right neighborhood. It might not be the exact one on the first go, but would take you to the right neighborhood.
You got it. If you're trying 3 heads and you haven't gotten anything different out of where you hit the ball, your fitter probably just is missing the boat on which head to pick, which is the most important thing. The shaft is important, because you saw that degree that it bends and twists that I showed you out of John Rahm today. That matters, but picking out the right head is the fastest way to getting a good fitting. Or earlier I mentioned how, go ahead, Matt.
Do you have a slide for the Atragon one-piece driver? I was waiting for that one.
You know, I'm trying to buy some really strange and hard to find drivers. I've got a Goldwyn driver in here and a few others, a Power Pod. Yep, you got it. I'm gonna find a few strange ones. The one piecers are hard. I can't really take that apart.
Didn't the Goldwyn one have no grip? You just hung onto the shaft.
No grip, or it's like so thin, tacky. So then you've got the difference between generations of driver. So here's an example of M1, M5, and the Sim. First, you can see how the MOI has always gone up. So they're small increments, sometimes a couple 100 grams per centimeter squared, but they're going up. Also, while that's happening, the center of gravity is going down on these. So you're not getting a more forgiving driver, but it's still spinning like a 3 would. It's going down. So this is what I'm suggesting by improvement. Lower CGs, higher MOIs, better drivers. They're changing. Now, someone who might come in and be fit for an M1 and got a really nice fitting, they hit the ball exactly where they want to on the club. Maybe it's just barely above this this yellow dot, or they've got the right amount of spin because of the driver fitting they've gotten. If they grab a Sim, it doesn't mean the ball's going to go 20 yards farther. But not everyone is getting a good fitting on that M1 first. And even if they've gotten fit for an M1, the Sim is still a pretty big difference between those two. And it's worth trying. It's worth the investment in your game.
Another factor too is you change over time. I mean, the player you are when you're 25 and 30 and 35 and 40, it changes for the better, some things, and some things get creakier and slower. I hear.
Great point. You read about that in a book? Or a friend told you? We've talked about that a bunch. You need what you need right now. You don't need what you need 10 years ago. That's not actually the right answer. Maverick, Callaway. This one's always hot to talk about, which is I found interesting as well. MOI 4461. Now, it's hard to remember all these numbers that I've already gone through, but 5,000 is probably a limit of where I'd say a driver is starting to lower in forgiveness. Like your maximum forgiveness drivers are around that 5,200 number. This would be 4461. It appears kind of low, but I don't really believe that anyway. First, they did a nice job of placing the CG about in the middle of the club. It's ever so slightly high, but that's done almost on purpose. because of the design of the club. This is made so there's less down here in the low back part, which is the opposite of the TaylorMade drivers. They do that because by moving the weight low and back, you've also made this less aerodynamic. So you're not as likely, not that you can't, you're less likely to swing it fast. This one, they tried to make a super forgiving driver, and it's fairly forgiving, but it's not the highest by any stretch. But also allow you to have some aerodynamics in there of less of club on the bottom, so you could swing this a couple miles an hour faster. So potentially you could swing this faster, and if you get a really nice fit on it, this thing will go far and straight as well. So it's really like that one too. But it's crazy to see how different paths these guys went on. These are the two major players in the game for drivers, and they're very different by design. Still going to tell you both of those would work great. Maverick Max, I think that one is not next, but now it is. In this one, you can change the settings as well. It has two different weights. You can move those around. They don't weigh the same. So if I put the heavy weight in the heel, I'm moving the center of gravity towards this spot right here. And if I put the heavy weight in the middle of the club back here, then I'm likely to keep the center of gravity closer to the middle of the face. So that's a pretty big difference too. I would think if you swing this one about 100 miles an hour, my best guess would be about 15 yards of difference in which way the ball could possibly end up by moving the CG around like that. And this one is a pretty high MOI. You're 52, 38 with this setting right here. That's pretty good. That's going to be a very forgiving driver. So all these could work. You might not swing this one as fast, but it's an awesome driver. Sub-Zero is the one that can change the most for someone who, there are players out there who want a lot less spin. This is the perfect driver for that. This one has two different weights in it. First one is in the back, and then the different one in the front. Those weigh different amounts too. Put the heavier one in the front, and you have an MOI that's pretty low, 4101, but you have a shot at lowering the center of gravity as well, and this one will spin the least. Out of all the drivers, if you're a good golfer and you want to spin it the least, grabbing this one and grabbing the regular sim would be your starting point. If you move the heavy weight into the back of the club, you gain 500 grams per centimeter squared of forgiveness, and now you've got a driver that's actually pretty forgiving, but still looks really nice. Like I think tour players like looking down at this driver. It's got a really classic look to it. Good depth of the face, and it's just an awesome driver. But this is a spin killer for sure. So if that's you. You want to spin it less? That thing is awesome.
That should have been the name instead of Maverick. Spin killer.
Yeah, there's a lot on that one.
I mean,
I asked the Callaway guys about that.
They could have taken a vowel out and then spin KLLR. I mean, that'd have been fine.
They already took a couple letters out, including a vowel to get to that. So, I mean, there's like your quick and dirty review about your 2020 drivers. The best advice I can give you is try to understand the concepts that I'm talking about here, which is where the sweet spot is and how forgiving a driver is. The terms used to describe that scientifically seem complicated. They're not. And knowing where those are is important for a fitter. It's important for a coach who fits clubs, which is still my preferred option for people. And then if you're trying to buy these on your own, good luck. That's not how it works.
Oh, what a good parting message out
Don't
there.
do it.
Good luck.
Don't do it. Club fitting, it's the cheapest investment in your game. And it's not because the product's cheap or inexpensive or not good. It's a small investment to make sure that you have a driver that you can stand on the first tee with and say, I feel good about this.
So as good as you're going to feel.
Yeah, as good as you're going to feel. Right.
So one of the cons to club fitting, Nick, is most people think, and honestly, this is my experience. Like, this was a very expensive shaft that's in this driver. I have a very expensive shaft in my other driver. They think of club fitting, and they think of a $900 driver. Is that always the case?
No. I think you're doing it wrong if that's what you're doing anyway. I think it's very cool, and we have shaft options that any GOLFTEC will carry that will give you like something that looks cool. I don't have anything laying around here, but if you want like the coolest shaft, we've got it. You want something that looks different, no one else at your club will have it, which is not a bad way to pick out your shafts. We can do that for you. But what we're trying to do is offer you a stock option. Any of the upgrades the OEMs have, they make some really good ones without having to tap into your wallet for another $500 driver. That isn't what's making the golf club. But then we'll also be able to get you, if you want to buy a $900 driver and make a good decision on which one to get, we've got that option too. But if that's your only option, is to really buy something that's very expensive, and I'm talking about something your first option is $700. You're not getting $700 worth of value out of that. You should be trying something that's just a stock shaft and a stock club head that Callaway, TaylorMade, Mizuno, Ping, Cobra, and Titleist might have. So it's okay to do that.
You hit some grounders, but your grounders had a lot of ball speed.
I love that grounder term. My favorite golf word.
I like it, but droop is right up there.
Droop's pretty good.
Droop's pretty
Deflection, droop, and grounder. You've got a nice little lexicon of words right there. So what else? You guys have to have, give me one question here about drivers that you kind of saw here and something that you think someone at home might want to know about.
For me, the swing weight element is a really important one. And I find that the interaction between what the head weighs, how long the shaft is, and how much the grip weighs that's a big determinant for me in the way the driver feels. Leaving aside the data that you're talking about here, I have trouble producing a consistent impact location on the face if I can't get that relationship correct. Where do you find head weights ranging in 2020 driver heads?
Sure. So all of these are around 200. Sometimes I find a 204. Sometimes I find a 190-ish, but they're all pretty similar that way. The swing weight that I think you're mentioning, most of these are going to come out near the low D range, like a D0, D1, D2. And that's typically what I'm trying to get at. But some of the combinations that I find people actually hit the best are much lighter than that. So having a shorter shaft and a stock head on it will significantly lighten what the club feels like. And that's really what swing weight is attempting to do. And I still see good results out of that. So I think that is very person to person dependent. If you did want to hit it really straight though, going with something heavy and short and heavy with the shaft is a good combo. And then you can get some higher swing weights out of clubs that still aren't made quite like, or aren't designed to be built like that, but you can get some good results and some heavy swing weights that way.
Because really what you're after, in addition to performance, I mean, the art of club fitting now is such that I think you can achieve performance gains, but also get a club that feels the way you want it to feel. And that's a big deal. And why that's like, to your point about club fitting being relatively cheap for what you get, it lets you produce shots that you like to see and that you also like to feel.
Yep. No, totally agree. You know, those are huge benefits of getting fit for your driver.
What about the opposite, Nick, for folks that hit it relatively straight with their driver? Have you ever recommended somebody go with a longer shaft just to see how, if they can pick up any ball speed?
Yeah, if you're, so first I would say that is a rare case, Gordy, as much as that might seem like that's pretty typical. Most people who are coming in for a club fitting aren't doing a great job hitting the center of the face relative to possibly their expectations. But that would be the perfect person to try this TS1 with. A lighter club head, super light shaft, and you could start trying some longer ones for sure. I don't know. I have some friends who have no problems fitting people for 46-inch drivers as their preferred driver. I don't see it. I don't see the results turning out that way. And maybe that's just more because of the importance and significance I put on having some sort of predictable ball flight. And I'm probably more interested in hitting fairways and teaching people to swing faster than giving them a longer club that might go farther if they hit it really well. But I don't really see too many people benefiting from over 45 inches on their driver shaft.
Perfect. And what's the length you recommend experimenting with if you want to go more accurate?
Depending on your skill, if you're terrible, you're rank beginner, you shoot in the hundreds, 3-wood shaft. So some of those can be as short as 43.5 built. That's just going to give you that centeredness of strike, which was the picture of John Rahm when you saw where he hit the club face. If I can get it out, here's where he hit it. That's step number one to hitting it far. Not get something longer and lighter where this becomes more complicated to do. but there's a possibility you swing the club faster. I mean, you can go down that school of thought, but I'd prefer let's teach people to hit the middle of the club with a driver they can swing fairly fast, and then teach them how to have better form to swing faster.
Isn't that step one, 120 miles an hour of club head speed, dead center of the club? Isn't that the first step to being a professional athlete?
That is the first step to being good at anything.
Well, on that bombshell, should we call it a close on our driver episode today?
Yeah, no, let's do that. I appreciate you guys. I know, Cordy, you're interested in club fitting, so hopefully you got something out of this. And Matt, you guys do that hot list every year, which is always really cool. I do think the ultimate way to probably up the game on the hot list would be to do something like this in addition to the human testing too. So I think that'd be super cool to see. I'm trying to do that myself though, so don't beat me.
Yeah, there's a technical element to it that is what gets things it doesn't get them over the finish line, it gets them over the starting line.
You got
it. So the manufacturers have to do a performance brief about the technical aspects ahead before they get to the players. But to your point, I mean, there are launch. I mean, I'm one of the. I get to supervise the pros, and so I get to watch people hitting good shots. Yeah. And when you watch Jason Gus, pipe one 285 and go, well, that one, it's not quite as hot off the face as the other one. You're like, okay,
right. Is Cordy frozen again? Oh, no, there he is. I saw a head nod.
I'm here. No, this is great, Nick. Thanks for diving in. I am really curious I'd be curious to get two heads, one of the low spin, the Maverick or the Sim, and then compare that to my gamer and see some of the different results, or get fit in there and see if you can gain more speed, but is the accuracy loss potentially worth it? So I think there's some real things to consider for folks if they like experimenting with different concepts, that there's some good testing you can do on your own to, kind of figure things out and see if there's something better out there for you.
Yeah, no doubt about it. And when you make it to Denver, that's what we should be doing. I'd be really curious to have you hit 10 shots with a Sim Max, 10 shots with yours, 10 with just a Sim, and let's show where those go.
For sure. Cool, guys. Matt, it's good to hang out with you today.
Good to see you guys. See you soon.
See you guys.